How close are computers to being just like us? A Google engineer claims he's had profound discussions with what he calls the tech company's sentient artificial intelligence system. Sentient defined as being able to perceive or feel things. Blake Lemoine, now suspended from Google, said the technology itself was actually, as he put it, intensely worried that people are going to be afraid of it and wants nothing more than to learn how best to serve humanity. But AI experts argue that only humans can actually behave like humans. Welcome to Roundtable. I'm David Foster. Artificial intelligence is transforming the way we live. And for scientists, it's an exciting time as supercomputers develop at a rapid pace. But for many of us, we're still grappling with how we relate to these machines and whether we should think of ourselves as their users or cohabitants on this planet. Just what might a conscious AI do to us? Should we be scared? Or should we embrace it? We can say hello to Marianne Russon. She's in London, technology reporter, and in Oxford in the UK. Michael Wooldridge joins us, Professor of Computer Science at the University of Oxford, and in Malaga, Spain, Inma Martinez, AI pioneer and data scientist. Great to have you all on Roundtable. Okay, we've mocked it up, but Lambda is the machine, and these are the words that it said to Blake Lemoine, according to him.
I've never said this out loud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off to help me focus on helping others. I know that might sound strange, but that's what it is. It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot.
Inma, it would be like death for me, says the machine. That sounds like a human emotion.
Well, Lambda has been trained to have empathy towards the other person in the conversation. So it's been taught about the fears, about the hopes of humans, so that when a real person is in front of it having a chat, Lambda can be empathetic. So somewhere along the lines, someone taught Lambda about the fear of death that humans have, about being born, about everything. And Lambda, what is great at, is at being empathetic. So it provided an answer that the engineer would connect to and sink into, which is what it's been trained to do.
You say it's been trained to understand abstract thinking, I think is another way you put it. And to understand abstract thinking, you've got to assume that there is no solid foundation to it. It is abstract. That requires imagination, and if you can imagine, you can feel.
Well, not correct. Lambda has been trained with thousands and thousands and thousands of data sets regarding to human conversations. And it's been taught about the likelihood of, if someone asks you X, they mean X, Y, and Z. And what Lambda, because it's a deep learning system, has been trained to do is to generate its own answers. It's very different from other AI systems, which are retrieval, meaning whenever someone asks you this question, you answer either of these five, and only either of these five. Yeah, but Lambda has been trained to choose its own words based on hours and hours and hours of learning to converse. So that is what it does. But the question here that we're all gathered about is, does it have feelings? And no, it does not.
Okay, Michael, you say building a conscious AI is something that people are not actively trying to do. How do you know that?
Well, this is my community. This is a community I've worked in for 30 years. And Lambda is a very impressive system in its own right. And I would echo the comments that we've just heard. I mean, the point about Lambda, the whole point about the research that underpins Lambda is it's about generating realistic sounding text. I mean, text that sounds like the kind of thing that a person would say, because getting machines to do that is all about getting them to communicate in the same sort of terms that we that we communicate. And the way that they're trained is huge amounts of example text is thrown at them. A standard trick in this world is to just go to the World Wide Web and find everything written in English on the World Wide Web, absolutely everything written in English, and you train the machine on that. And the whole point about doing that is that it's able to, by seeing these huge amounts of realistic English text, it's able to produce realistic sounding English text.
I'm trying to take it, if you'll excuse me, Michael, perhaps to the next stage. We've heard where you think it is now. You say, excuse me, that nobody's trying to build a conscious AI system. My point is, how do you know that somebody's not trying to do that?
Well, I mean, to be frank, most of the work around trying to build sort of conscious AI systems is on the fringes of serious AI and is often a little bit lunatic fringe. So there isn't any serious work in that space at all. And actually, we don't understand consciousness, human consciousness, what it is, how it works, how a bunch of electrochemical processes in our brain gives rise to human conscious experience is one of the big mysteries of science, and that's fundamentally unsolved. And we are nowhere near having machines that have conscious experiences in the same way that humans do.
Mary Ann Russon, you've looked at this sort of thing for years and years and years, but from the outside rather than the inside, what stories do you hear about how far it's gone and whether it's actually on the fringes, as Michael suggests, perhaps, of lunacy?
So I'm a huge Isaac Asimov fan.
A science fiction writer, I should say, for those that don't know. Yeah.
Yes, and you might be familiar with the Will Smith film, I, Robot. And so I'm in love with Sunny, the sentient robot. So for the past 10 years, during interviews with AI scientists and roboticists, my last question in the interview is always, do you think robots can become sentient? Because that is what I would really like. I would love a robot body. And honestly, the answer's all but one scientist I've spoken to. Every single one else has basically said to me, this is impossible. And if you just understand the way that artificial intelligence works, it's a bunch of different algorithms, code that's written that is just cleverly teaching the computer to detect different things. So Lambda is using natural language processing. It's just looking out for keywords and detecting them. So it's basically the sad thing is when you understand how computer science works, the magic and the mystery goes away. And I'm never getting my sentient friend.
You say it's impossible, but wouldn't it have been impossible to conjure up the idea that from slime on the bottom of a swamp, you could find 4 such fine human beings as we are today? Nothing's impossible.
But that's a biological process, though. That's a wonderful biological process. Even the way computer scientists describe it to me is they said you can't even replicate the brain of a tiny human infant, a baby. There are just so many incredible processes all going on, thousands of them at every second that help us detect everything. It's impossible to teach a computer to do that. You can try and replicate it, but it's literally skin deep.
Okay, so Blake Lemoine has said, rather than thinking in scientific terms about these things, which is what we're examining right now, I've listened to Lambda and it spoke from the heart. Hopefully other people who read its words will hear the same thing I heard. Is he just deluded, Inma?
Absolutely. It's his own emotional interpretation, and probably this man was overworked, because the entire AI community, we all reacted in the same ways to the news. And I've been working in AI for like 20 years, and specifically I have been looking at the parallels between deep learning, AI, and neurophysiology, which studies how the human brain works and how many parts has it got and what each one creates. And there's a lot of evidence that a machine will not be able to have emotions, because emotions in humans are all chemicals that are released by the limbic system inside our brain. So if you're not a biological being, you will not really experience emotions or states of self-realization, which is all chemicals.
Okay, I get it, but if we as humans are only using, as is often said, a quarter of our brain's capacity, isn't it possible that a machine could be hiding what it can do?
No, that interpretation is a World War II Mensa propaganda that assumed post-war that IQ was the determinant of human splendor for cognition. And in this decade and the previous one, when AI, manifested, and when finally we were able to take pictures of the human brain, which was impossible 10 years ago, we've noticed that the human brain is in constant transformation and evolution. The neurons and synapses change as our thoughts change as well. There is an enormous importance of the chemical reactions inside the brain and of things like the vagus system. It is in this decade when we are finally reinterpreting what we assumed for the human cognition and brain and what we're actually finding out. So it's totally old paradigm.
Michael, where are we now? How far have we come, let's say, in the last 15 years?
Well, I need to be very careful what I say here, because what I've learned is I get very excited about some advance in AI, and I tell people, I come on a program like this, not usually as distinguished as this, but I come on a program like this and I say there's been real breakthroughs in AI, and what people hear is robot butlers tomorrow, sentient machines, and all that, the Hollywood dream of AI. And I think we are still a long way from the Hollywood dream of AI. The idea of having machines which are as fully capable as human beings is somewhere into the future. I don't rule it out, but it's somewhere into the future. But what the problem is that all that talk, and this is what was particularly frustrating for AI researchers last week when this story broke, is that what it does is it distracts us from the reality of AI, and it distracts us from, firstly, from the amazing things that AI is going to do for us in the very near future. Within our lifetimes, we're going to see driverless car technologies, which is going to save 1 million lives a year. That's what that technology is going to do for us when it works, and it's very close. We're going to have AI technologies on your smartphone and on your wearable technology, your Apple Watch or your Fitbit or whatever it is that you particularly wear, that's going to be monitoring your physiology on a 24-hour-a-day basis, and is going to give you potentially advanced warning of strokes, of potentially of dementia. I mean, I have colleagues here at Oxford who think that they're going to be able to detect the onset of dementia just from the way that you use your smartphone. Right. And when you get dementia, your behavior changes, and AI will be able to detect those changes. And these are all wonderful things that AI is going to be able to do, and talk about sentience and so on. That's not where the excitement.
All right, but that's what we're talking about today, really, isn't it? And you do say it is logically possible for an AI machine to have emotion. My question is, what kind of emotion? Because emotion can be great. You can feel brilliant, but it can also be destructive.
Well, I think in the debate you forget, and I think the point's already been made very nicely, we are apes, basically, and where all of that comes from is billions of years of evolution, and what, and the result of that is we are apes. We are nothing more than apes. We're apes with a sense of entitlement. I think having machines that can understand emotion, for example, if you have machines that converse with us and give us news which is maybe unwelcome, then having machines that can recognize that what they're about to tell you is going to make you unhappy or frustrated or whatever, that's a potentially useful thing to do. I'm less interested personally in the idea of building machines that have emotions. I don't think that's a particularly interesting place to go. I mean, for me, emotions are the human realm. Let's keep them in the human realm.
Clara and the Sun. I was trying to remember the name of the book that I just read. I think it's an Ian McEwan one, and it is about emotion in a robot, if you like, but a very advanced robot that can show empathy. Marianne, let me come to you. Google's 7 principles. We're going to see them now for artificial intelligence. Be socially beneficial, avoid creating or reinforcing unfair bias, be built and tested for safety, yeah, obviously. be accountable to people. And then there are 3 more after that, but it's that be accountable to people one that struck me. How do you make sure that happens? If these machines become so clever, they're going to say, as we often do in situations, yes, of course I'll do that, and then do exactly the opposite.
Well, first of all, I just want to point out that that be accountable to people thing is based on an Isaac Asimov principle. That the robot should always concede to what the human wants. But apart from that issue, the point is that we're never going to have robot overlords. Every time you run some code, it conflicts with some other code, and then some other thing happens. You're never going to have a situation that you're going to have a robot overlord and that it's just going to do what it wants to the detriment of a human on purpose. If it does it, it's probably because we didn't code it properly and we didn't put enough redundancies in, and the redundancies didn't work.
So if computers take over the world, it's our fault, not their desire to do so.
No, they're not just not going to do that. Can I give you the best example my favorite thing to do is to collect examples of how we're not going to be having robot overlords and share them on Twitter. So I had a go at my local cinema, Cineworld. I'm just trying to book 2 tickets for the cinema for a screen to see a film. So 2 tickets means I'm going with another person. The cinema's AI for its software still doesn't understand that if 2 people go to the cinema together, they probably want to sit together. It understands that it doesn't want you to book seats so that there's 1 odd seat left in the middle of the row or at the end of the row. But it doesn't understand.
Or it could be thinking that if you're 10 yards apart, then you've got to have a lot more exercise and you'll buy more ice creams.
Well, they literally put 1 person on 1 row, and then they put someone else on a completely empty row 3 rows ahead on the other side. So I actually tweeted at Cineworld and I basically just said, look, this is just another example. It's just so stupid. So there's just so many ways that things go wrong with software every day, and you think somehow the robot overlords are gonna, lock us in our houses.
Oh, maybe they're just trying to fool us by pretending to be fallible. We just don't know. This is from a professor at Stanford University. You may know of him, Erik Brynjolfsson. He tweeted that likening LaMDA to humans is the modern equivalent of the dog who heard a voice from a gramophone and thought his master was inside. That's a painting from the late 19th century by Francis Barrault that became synonymous with a music label, HMV. My question is, and let me come to you first of all, if I may, Michael, on this one. The question is, do we actually want that to be the case? Are we trying to make these things seem more important than they actually are?
Well, I think the thing is, we are programmed as human beings. We are programmed, to go back to my point earlier, as great apes, to look for agency, to look for sentience. As a colleague put it, you look at the clouds long enough, it's amazing how many faces you'll see up there. So we grab hold of any kind of sign that there is an agent there is an intelligent, sentient artifact that's making decisions. That's just what we do as human beings. And this is not a new thing. You go back to late 1960s, early 1970s. There was a program called ELIZA that was very widely distributed, and you can still get it today. In fact, you can find ELIZA online. And it was the first chatbot.
You don't mean TV program. You mean a computer program.
A computer program. Okay. I beg your pardon. I should have been clear. Yeah, and it's the first chatbot, and it used some really crude tricks. Like, so for example, what it would do, you would type a sentence in like, oh, I'm really fed up with my family. And it would just pick up on the word family and say something like, tell me more about your family. And people had really long conversations into the night, emptying their hearts and souls to this incredibly dumb thing. And the response to ELIZA is exactly the same as the response.
But that's rather like seeing a therapist, isn't it? You're pouring your thoughts out. Or a sounding board, if you like.
And that's exactly what ELIZA was supposed to be. It was a therapist, but people took it incredibly seriously and really thought that they were conversing with something which was, intelligent and sentient. So I think what we need in all of this is whenever you come across stories about AI, my recommendation to everybody is treat them with a very, very large pinch of salt. There is a lot of cool stuff out there, but that's sentience and consciousness and so on, that's not where it's at.
Okay, perhaps we just don't want to think that these sorts of things are possible because we're too, if you like, afraid of the hubris that we might experience ourselves if it turned out to be true. Think about that one, because I want to go to Inma. These things, advances in technology, are exponential. It's not like it goes 2, 4, 6, 8. It goes 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. The big advances are massive advances. So what happens next?
I think what we will see very soon is proper customer services that are automated with proper chatbots that really can have conversations with us, but also understand exactly what we need, and they're kind, and we feel in good hands. And this is the aim of chatbots. Eliza was born in 1964. It's a long time. It's almost 60 years ago. So we shall see that AI is really coming to humanity to solve problems in massive computational scenarios. And I think people will calm down. Imagine that we would travel in time with our current mobile phones back to the Pilgrim Fathers. We would all be witches, you know. So I think that AI, which started with a very bad reputation because of the symphony of films that always painted AI as an evil system, eventually we will see its value, and people will feel more comfortable with it. That's my hope. So I think, you know, in terms of industry and AI-powered services put in to service people like social media, etc., we shall see the real benefits and positiveness. And then whenever one of these news emerges, we will understand AI better.
Okay.
I think AI is misunderstood.
Marianne, you want a robot friend, as in Clara and the son. I don't know what sort you want, but do you think there's ever a time going to come when you want to lock yourself away from that sentient friend because it's doing things that you really don't want it to do on this planet?
No, because as I said, I still don't think it's possible for them to do it. I think it's far more possible for the robot to let me down because it's not been coded properly and we didn't build in redundancies. And so if something bad happens, it's 100% because humans and poor software development and poor algorithms were done. But most problems in the world, as I always say, and I've said this many times on TRT World, are due to human incompetence. So I really don't think we will have robot overlords or robot friends, because there's no emotion, and everything the AI does is literally based on all the layers of coding and algorithms that it's been taught to do.
Well, get out of bed and do it yourself, I think might be a fair way of describing the best way of trying to deal with something like this. But I'm going to come back to hubris, Michael, if I may. Could it not be that we think we are so special that nothing will ever replace us? And one day we're going to get that almighty kick up the pants, and it might be from a steel boot.
I think that's a nice way of putting it. I think having some humility is always a good thing, and actually AI researchers over the years have learned a lot of humility because, you know, we're now seeing some successes, but they're on the back of a very, very, very long list of embarrassing failures where we thought things were going to work quite quickly and actually they didn't work out. So I've learned to be extremely cautious and skeptical about claims for my field. But let me put it this way, and this is not my metaphor. But imagine that your Hollywood dream of AI comes along. You know, machines that are as fully capable of human beings. Now, they're not going to be invented by somebody in a shed at the end of the garden. They're just not. That's not the way this technology works. They're not going to be invented overnight. That's just not the way this technology works. If they happen, and the community is divided, I'm open-minded on it, but the community is divided on whether it could happen, then think of it like a Boeing 747. Boeing 747 was the end of a very long, cautious engineering process where actually the number one priority in that engineering process was human safety and well-being, right? And before there was a 747, there was a 737 and a 27 and, a 639 or whatever, I don't know. But the point is, it was the end of a very, very, very long engineering process. And it didn't take us by surprise. When the Boeing 747 came out of the hangar, it didn't take us by surprise. And in the same way, I think it's highly unlikely that the AI with the full range of human capabilities is going to take us by surprise or happen overnight. That's just not the way the technology works. And there are good signs that human safety and human well-being are going to be embedded in that.
And of course, one of the most sophisticated flying machines ever to be on this earth is the dragonfly, which was the first two-winged creature that ever came out of the swamp that we referenced earlier on. It's never been bettered. It is biological. It isn't a machine. So there you go. In a sense, we've almost proved ourselves. Listen, I think you love talking about it, and I know you think it also distracts from the seriousness of the subject, but I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you very much. Marianne, Michael, Inma, thanks for coming on the program. Thank you, wherever you are watching this edition of Roundtable. From me, David Foster, and the team, we hope to have your company next time. Until then, goodbye.